Chapter 321 Blind Date. Why? You want me to help you chase someone? Mo Xiao has fulfilled his promise and visited Jiang Shi quite often. He has a good physical condition and recovered quickly. He can walk now. During the time in the ward, Mo Xiao would occasionally get so angry at the other party's venomous tongue that she wanted to punch him. But fortunately, she has strong self-control. Whenever this happens, she will silently recite the Great Compassion mantra in her heart, thinking that his injuries are caused by her. And she must be patient. 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 And this account can be settled later. But most of the time, she still can't bear it after reciting the Great Compassion mantra. There is no way. She can only recite it silently at the end. Buddha said, "Don't save fools. Bullying the wounded. As long as that person is Jiangxi, the guilt seems to be reduced a lot. Finally, quickly get out before the other guards rush in." The situation in the base has changed during this period. Qin Xiao, the original veteran, has been very depressed in Zhu Ying's laboratory. He originally wanted to use the remaining body to provide some data for the reverse experiment of the half-infected. As a result, who would have thought that he would be plotted by Zhu Ying, the stinky woman, not long after arriving at the laboratory? Yes, he was frozen. Qin Xiao's consciousness was unclear. Not only his body was frozen, but his thinking seemed to be sluggish. Zhu Ying didn't know when she had discussed this with Mo Xiao. Qin Xiao was frozen. According to Zhu Ying, she wanted to put him into forced hibernation before he completely turned into a zombie. Of course, ordinary living people would definitely die completely under such a temperature. But Qin Xiao was different. He was a powerful semi-infected person. According to Zhu Ying's guess, he would exist in a dormant way like the zombies outside. The purpose of Zhu Ying's doing this was actually to delay the time of Qin Xiao's zombie transformation. And this was also one of the conditions for Mo Xiao to be willing to become a volunteer. From Zhu Ying's point of view, among the semi-infected people in the entire Tianan base, no one was more suitable than Mo Xiao to assist her experiment. Qin Xiao in the past might have been considered one, but he had gone through too many experiments, and the situation was complicated and not pure enough. And his current condition was precarious, and he couldn't hold on for a few times. Zhu Ying had actually been coveting Mo Xiao, the experimental material, for a long time. It was just a pity that this person was in a high position and had great power, and Zhu Ying couldn't do anything to her unless she volunteered. Now that Mo Xiao had finally made this request, Zhu Ying naturally had no choice. As long as Zhu Ying could successfully ensure that Qin Xiao entered hibernation, Mo Xiao would be willing to cooperate with her experiment, until the day when the semi-infected person's reverse transformation experiment was completely successful. Qin Xiao would be awakened from hibernation again, and he would be saved. This was their plan. Mo Xiao called Zhu Ying in the hospital. The two of them worked together, and Qin Xiao never expected that Mo Xiao would act so quickly, and was tricked by the two women. The thoughts in his mind gradually stagnated, and Qin Xiao didn't know if he could wake up again. The world seemed to fall into darkness, as if returning to the time when he was born. He finally lost consciousness bit by bit. This day, in Tianyan Hospital, Jiangxi sat in a chair by the window. His injured leg was wrapped like a big sausage and placed on a small coffee table. The bandages and gauze on other places were much less. He ate fruit while basking in the simulated sunlight outside the window. Lazy, even a little comfortable, and seemed to be in a good mood. There was another person pacing back and forth in the ward. The military boots stepped on the ground, making a crisp sound, and the messy footsteps revealed the owner's messy and anxious mood. Jiangxi tapped his fingertips on the armrest, while calculating how long it would take for someone to visit, and said casually, "If you keep jumping up and down like a monkey with a burning butt, get out." "Brother Shi, I'm anxious." Zhao Peng heard him and immediately sat on the chair opposite. Crying, he took a sip of the fruit tea on the table inside. Zhao Peng is a man of high status and power, but he is still as servile to Jiangxi as he was in school. If the young soldiers under his command saw him like this, their eyes would pop out. Jiangxi saw him drink the fruit tea he prepared for someone. He frowned. He picked up the crutches beside him and chased him off the chair. Inhuman. Inhuman to the opposite sex. Zhao Peng ran away like a chicken and a dog, accusing him with a passionate voice. After saying that, seeing Jiangxi glanced at him with a smile. He suddenly shuddered, and his mouth sewed shut like a zipper. Then he began to roll around on the bed, sighing. Jiangxi was annoyed by him and finally asked, "What's the matter, Brother Shi? Are you willing to help me? As soon as Jiangxi said this, Zhao Peng, who was still throwing a tantrum on the bed just now, immediately climbed up the pole and squatted in front of him as if his feet were greased. Jiangxi sneered. I knew you were waiting for me here. After saying that, he closed his eyes and rested, as if he didn't care whether Zhao Peng said it or not. Zhao Peng waited and waited but didn't see Jiangxi's promise. He was so anxious that he scratched his head. In the end, he was the first to give up, and said weakly, Sister Ye is going on a blind date. Jiangxi frowned and glanced down at him. It was common knowledge that Zhao Peng had a crush on Tongya. Over the years, he was alone, and except for military missions, he spent almost all his free time with Tongya. For example, Zhao Peng had performed the cliched scenes of meeting her on the street and helping her carry heavy objects countless times. But Tongya's personality, TSK, she's a little unpleasant. I don't know what Zhao Peng likes about her, and he has been obsessed with her for so many years. Thinking of Tongya, Jiangxi thought of how that woman had said so many bad things about him to Imo Xiao when they were roommates. Jiangxi thought about it, and felt that it was all Tongya's fault that Imo Xiao had been distant from him for a while in his freshman year. He rested his chin with one hand and fell into deep thought. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that he and Imo Xiao had come to this point now, and it must have been hindered by these evil winds in his ears. Thinking of this, Jiangxi's mind flashed back to Chu Wen's sinister face, and the scene of him and Imo Xiao going out together for so many years. He snorted coldly. Suddenly, he felt a little annoyed when he saw the half cup of fruit tea on the other side. Drank it all. He glanced at Zhao Peng. Ah? Zhao Peng was still staring at Jiangxi with a bitter face, asking him to help him. Then he saw his face suddenly darken. His heart suddenly started beating. No. No! Sister Ye is going on a blind date. Why is brother she so unhappy? Zhao Peng trembled and picked up the fruity cup, drank the remaining half cup in one gulp, and fell into panic. Could it be that brother she has changed his personality? He likes our Sister Ye, who is a simple and easy-to-eat person. Zhao Peng was shocked and stood up straight. No. No! If brother she joins the competition, won't he be barbecue? Zhao Peng's face changed again and again. As an outsider, Jiangxi was watching with great interest. Suddenly, he raised his eyebrows slightly, and smiled with a hint of malice. Blind date? What? You want me to help you chase someone? Chapter 322 Zhao Peng's Obsession. No. No. No! Zhao Peng, who had imagined a drama of being stabbed by his close brother and then having his love taken away, now wished that Jiangxi would not get involved in this matter. He had figured it out. Brother she was a playful person, and most likely he was not really interested in Sister Ye. But he was really capable of doing such a wicked thing as teasing someone and then turning away from her. There was nothing he could do. This was the evil rich and handsome guy. He had the capital and no taboos. Maybe he was bored and wanted to play around on a whim. Anyway, he didn't succeed with Xiao Mo. Zhao Peng changed his previous attitude and waved his hands to refuse. I still want to trouble brother she for such a small matter. Wasn't I ignorant before? Please don't help me. I must sharpen my will. He straightened his chest and said righteously, the righteousness of the country is in front of me. How can I be trapped in the private affairs of children? At the end of the words, they were sonorous and powerful, and in a trance, they seemed to be sincere, and even choked slightly. After speaking, he suddenly fell silent, with a sad face. Jiangxi raised his eyebrows in surprise. Are you really just watching like this? Do nothing? Zhao Peng's already pumped up chicken blood was broken by Jiangxi's question. Over the years, everyone has seen how persistent he is. However, what puzzles everyone is that Zhao Peng just treats Tongya well without asking for anything in return. It seems that he has never confessed his feelings. Brother she, you know, there is a reason why I have been working in the air search and rescue department, Zhao Peng said in a low voice. He was born on a small island. His ancestors lived by the sea. As the saying goes, if you live by the mountain, you can eat the mountain. If you live by the water, you can eat the water. Because his parents are fishermen. Zhao Peng, who grew up in the water, often jokes that he is the son of the sea, which is not far away. Zhao Peng has been smart since he was a child, and is the best student in their village. In order to prevent him from being a fisherman, his parents worked hard from dawn to dusk. They spent a lot of money to train him, and did not miss any extracurricular tutoring. Fortunately, Zhao Ping is also very hardworking. In the end, he was admitted to a famous school. Although Zhao Peng looks like a fool on the surface, he actually knows his parents' hard work in his heart. He also secretly vowed that when he has a promising future, he must take his parents out of the island and no longer suffer from the wind and sun. He came from a small place, facing the glamour of big cities, and felt that his height and appearance were not very impressive. Compared with his classmates, the gap was too big. At first, he actually felt a little inferior in his heart. Until later, when he was squeezed by several sports students in the small playground because of his thinness and shortness. Tanya, who passed by, helped him. Zhao Peng's mentality gradually began to change. Tanya was always so calm and confident, and never looked down on herself because of her physical condition. Zhao Peng especially liked this about her. But it was precisely because he knew her temper well that Zhao Peng also knew that in addition to this, she was particularly rational. Ordinary people are always prone to repeated struggles between reality and ideals. But Tanya is not such a person. She will weigh the pros and cons directly, and her attacks and compromises are very straightforward. Just like after coming to Tianyin. Although she wanted to fight with Mo Xiao and others, she still decisively chose a stable job in the rear for her parents. Even though her parents didn't care that she followed her heart and took risks. Even though they hoped that she would not leave any regrets. Even though they respected every decision she made. Tanya is such a person. Zhao Peng followed and watched silently for many years. So he didn't want to say it, and didn't dare to say it, because Zhao Peng always felt that he would fly back to his hometown one day to see it with his own eyes. Although they said that the island was submerged when they saw it from the satellite. But Zhao Peng still did not give up. There are some things that he must see with his own eyes. But his hometown is too far away. And in this crisis-ridden end of the world, only the Air Search and Rescue Department can help him do it. Zhao Peng knew that sooner or later, he would take off and embark on this dangerous journey home. His fate is unpredictable, and he may even die on this long and dangerous journey. But he did not regret it. He would regret it if he did not do this. Zhao Peng did not dare to confess to Tanya. In fact, he was not afraid that she would refuse. But he was more afraid that after she agreed, he would die. Rather than being so painful, it would be better to. In silence, Zhao Peng suddenly felt that maybe the blind date arranged by the elders this time was not a bad thing. A good girl like Tanya deserves to live a peaceful and happy life like Li Pingping and Zhang Jiwei. Maybe it's right to let go. Jiang Shi's eyes turned, and he knew Zhao Peng's mental journey. He yawned lazily, and didn't say much about it. It's just a blind date, not a dead person. He never cared much about other people's emotional experiences, and he was too lazy to intervene. As long as Zhao Peng doesn't affect his work. Zhao Peng obviously had prepared for it, but his chest was sour and stuffy. After sitting for a while, he couldn't help sighing. What do you think Uncle Imo is doing all day long? It's not enough to always think about arranging a blind date for Xiao Imo. And he also arranges these nonsense things for Sister Ya. Tell me, can he trust the person he met on the blind date? He'd better be reliable. Zhao Peng kept talking in anger. Jiang Shi suddenly turned his head. His sword-like eyebrows gathered, and his eyes stared at him like a hawk. What did you say? Zhao Peng was startled by him, opened his mouth, and said awkwardly, I said that the person who was found through blind dates is unreliable. The last sentence? He also did it for Sister Ya. Seeing Jiang Shi's increasingly gloomy face, Zhao Peng suddenly had an idea as if he was assisted by God, and quickly explained, Brother Shi, don't worry. Xiao Imo didn't agree to participate in any blind dates. She is just a wooden lump, busy all day long. And the little free time she has left is to visit you in the ward. How can she have the time for a blind date? Besides, looking at the entire base, which blind date can compare to you? Even a blind man knows how to choose. Seeing that Jiang Shi's face was not getting better, Zhao Peng thought to himself, how dare he say that Xiao Imo was a blockhead in front of Brother Shi? He was really arrogant. He quickly made up for it, and changed the subject. Don't worry. I have already inquired about it. Xiao Imo only agreed to accompany Sister Ya with Uncle Imo out of helplessness. Accompany? Just accompany. Jiang Shi hooked his hand, and held Zhao Peng under his arm. He seemed to smile very softly, and said slowly, Time. Place. Zhao Peng replied carefully, Brother Shi, your injury is not healed yet. Then, he saw the other parties, increasingly friendly smile. Zhao Peng couldn't help shuddering. And his mouth was as straightforward as a firecracker. Today at noon. Minus 12 floors. Tianyuan Restaurant. Chapter 323. What is this? A new type of fraud? On the 12th floor below ground. At an alley outside the Tianyuan Restaurant. Jiang was wearing casual clothes. A hat with the brim pulled down. And leaning against a wall. A cane was placed next to the wall beside him. He was holding a copy of the Tianyan Electronic Daily in his hand. And was reading it seriously with his head down. It looked like a passerby who had just passed by a newsstand. Stopping here for a while to borrow a newspaper to read. Zhao Peng paced back and forth beside him. Anxiously saying, Brother Shi. Time is almost up. While saying this, Zhao Peng couldn't help but look out at the street outside the alley. The Tianyuan restaurant on the street was doing good business. And couples often came and went. Zhao Peng used his reconnaissance skills, which he had trained in the military for many years, to scan through the store window and locked onto the most suspicious target. One of them was sitting at table 13. About 20 years old. Dressed in a suit and had a big belly. It was obvious that he had a good financial situation to have such a physique. There was a bouquet of flowers on his desk. And the man looked around from time to time, as if he was waiting for someone. The age was right. The family conditions were good. And he was still waiting for someone with flowers. Suspicious. It was really suspicious. Zhao Peng couldn't help but take a few more glances. And muttered sourly, with this figure. He has to breathe heavily after walking a few steps. Can he protect Sister Ye when the zombies come? He made up this excuse. But completely forgot that they would soon be able to fully build the 6th protective barrier. The residents underground would hardly encounter the zombie crisis again. If you don't agree, just go over there. Jiang's fingertips flicked and turned a page of the newspaper. His mouth was full of teasing. But his eyes were floating, not staying on the electronic paper page. If he really had to go. Zhao Peng's breath was choked. His mood was low. And he was scared again. Jiang's lips curled up and smiled knowingly. He just looked at the man's situation. Although it was suspicious, he should not be here for a blind date. The man looked around frequently, seemingly looking at the door. But his eyes were actually on the bathroom many times. The bouquet looked beautiful. But on the way here, Jiang noticed that there was a flower shop near the hospital not far away. Judging from the packaging, this bouquet came from there. Judging from the choice of flowers, it was most likely bought to visit a patient. And, most importantly, he felt that Tanya would not like this type of man. Of course, Zhao Peng was confused by the situation. And Jiang could understand it. Otherwise, if this was put in military training, Zhao Peng would definitely be punished. The street outside Tianyuan restaurant. At the other end of the alley, Mo Xiao stood beside Tanya and asked curiously, Aren't you here for a blind date? Why don't you go over? She was also wearing casual clothes today. Mo Xiao was used to wearing military uniforms on weekdays. And it had been a long time since she went shopping hand in hand with her friends. When Tanya said she was going on a blind date, Mo Xiao was shocked. Later, she asked her to accompany her. And Mo Xiao thought that she just had a half day off. So she came over. Wait a little longer. Tanya's outfit didn't change much. And she even looked like she was going to work every day. Rather than saying she was here for a blind date, she looked more like she was taking a short break from work. Mo Xiao was very observant. And he just glanced at the direction of her eyes and suddenly said, Are you waiting for someone? She squinted her eyes and thought for a while. Then said with a smile, Are you waiting for our brother Peng? Tanya glanced at Mo Xiao. Her eyes were big. And every glance seemed like she was glaring at someone. So it was hard to tell when she was glaring at someone, and when she was just accidentally hurting someone. Li Pingping had once cried because of an accidental injury. But Mo Xiao was not Li Pingping. She smiled nonchalantly and teased. It turns out that the drunkard's intention was not to drink. No wonder. No wonder. Tanya rolled her eyes, pulled out a huge hat from her bag, and covered Mo Xiao's head. You will go in for me later. In the underground world. Because there is no hidden worry of strong wind, heavy rain, heavy snow, and strong sun. There are very few people who wear hats. Especially this kind of exaggerated large-brimmed hat. Mo Xiao touched the brim of the hat, laughed, and then looked at Tanya with a tangled expression. Hesitant to speak. What do you want to say? Tanya couldn't help but glared at her again. Sister Ye, Do you want me to pretend to be you? Mo Xiao reminded her tactfully. We both have similar figures. Well, I mean, it's not easy to disguise. I didn't prepare well in advance, and I'm not sure if I can hide it from him. Tanya said calmly with a straight face. It doesn't matter. He's stupid. Mo Xiao blinked and shut up. Since the parties involved think it's feasible, what can she, the runner-up, say? The two waited for a while. As time passed, Tanya's face became more and more ugly. Suddenly, she pulled Mo Xiao and said in a deep voice, "Let's go." The other side. Zhao Peng looked around furtively at the alley for a long time. But no one came. He was secretly happy. Maybe Sister Ye didn't come because she had something to do. Who knew that just when he was happy, he saw a familiar figure across the street. Zhao Peng's smile froze on his face. Here. The corners of his lips were bitter. Jiangxi glanced and saw a woman wearing a hat in his sight. Although he couldn't see her face clearly, he looked at her skinny figure like a chicken and her tasteless work clothes. It should be Tanya without a doubt. After all, even Zhao Peng had personally confirmed it. As he got closer, the crowd became thinner, and another woman with a wide hat brim appeared behind Tanya in his sight. Jiangxi's eyes fixed. Then, he sneered in his heart. He was so perfunctory on a date with Tanya that he didn't even have time to change into work clothes. You, on the other hand, specially wore a casual outfit that I had never seen before, and you took it more seriously than the real owner. Why didn't you bother to change clothes when you came to the hospital to see him? You always wore a pitch-black wild grass camp uniform and wandered in front of him. They were about to reach the door of the restaurant. Zhao Peng stuck his butt out and kept looking around the corner of the alley. Jiangxi's lips curled up a mischievous smile, picked up the crutch next to him as support, raised his other intact leg, and kicked Zhao Peng's butt with a bang. Ouch! Mo Xiao and Tanya had just arrived at the door of the store. Then, they saw a man suddenly jump out and fall at their feet. What is this? A new type of fraud? Chapter 324 Fake Blind Date and Real Blind Date. Zhao Peng. Until Tanya spoke, Mo Xiao realized that the man who was suspected of being a scammer was actually Zhao Peng. Zhao Peng, who was kicked out of nowhere, stood up awkwardly without any preparation. He subconsciously straightened his clothes and hair, looked at Tanya, touched the back of his head and smiled. Hey, Sister Ye. Long time no see. Just saw you the day before yesterday. Ahem. Yes. Look at my memory. I've been too busy recently and forgot. Zhao Peng pretended to pass by and looked around. Are you shopping with Xiao Mo? Mo Xiao held back his laughter, took off his hat, and spread his hands. I told you. It doesn't work at all. Tanya glared at her again, then turned to Zhao Peng. No. Let's go on a blind date. When these words came out, Mo Xiao and Zhao Peng choked at the same time. Mo Xiao always felt a little redundant in a movie with three people. She stepped aside awkwardly. You guys chat first. I'll wait for you inside. After that, she slipped into the Tianyuan restaurant and found an empty seat nearby to sit down. A blind date. Zhao Peng felt a little choked up in his throat. The man must be very good to be liked by you. Not bad, but a little stupid. Tanya looked at him and said. When the word not bad came out, Zhao Peng almost felt like running away. Over the years, Zhao Peng had never heard Tanya speak so highly of a man. Except for her father. He forced a smile and said, Yes. Is that so? But he treats me very well. Tanya's eyes softened. He may not have the best talent, and sometimes he lacks confidence, but he works hard, is brave, and is determined. He insists on moving forward step by step from the most ordinary and ordinary place, and has never given up. Although he is noisy sometimes, I think he is a man worth entrusting. With every word Tanya said, Zhao Peng's face turned paler, and the bitterness in his heart deepened. He had been hanging around Tanya for so many years, but he didn't realize that she already had someone she liked. And these descriptions. Zhao Peng's chest felt as if a bottle of high-concentration white vinegar had been drained. This is not a blind date. This is clearly short of getting married. Zhao Peng could no longer maintain a decent smile, and was about to turn around in a hurry. Suddenly, he heard Tanya's clear and calm voice. So, Zhao Peng, do you want to be with me? Huh? What? Zhao Peng turned around a little confused and looked at her straight. I. Tanya smiled. I didn't have much hope for love and marriage in this world. But then one day I found that there are still good men in this world. Such as some guys who are not so strong, don't look handsome at first sight, and are relatively not so outstanding, but are very smart and affectionate. This. Zhao Peng heard it sounded familiar. Suddenly, he remembered that this was what he said when he complained about Brother Shi's cold-bloodedness in the RV. At that time, he didn't think much of it. Now, when he heard Sister Ye say it calmly and seriously, Zhao Peng actually felt a little embarrassed. He seemed to be hit by a pie in the sky, and he was originally eloquent. But now, he seemed a little dull. Zhao Peng, what are you worried about? Tanya continued. Even though she was petite, her work clothes made her aura look very strong. I won't wait forever. This last sentence made Zhao Peng, who was originally in high spirits, calm down instantly, as if a bucket of cold water was poured on his head. Zhao Peng couldn't help but clench his fists. He had a dangerous journey in the future, and he might lose his life. Sister Ye is good. Very good. Very good. But the better the other party is, the more he can't delay her. He can't make her suffer and worry. Tanya's eyes dimmed, and a sense of loss flashed across her. In fact, she set up this game today. Zhao Peng was timid, so she took a step forward. But the result showed that there was something she didn't expect. I know. Tanya pursed her lips. Her pride made her turn around and leave almost immediately. But these unhurried steps suddenly stopped after just a few steps. Then, she turned back angrily, grabbed Zhao Peng's wrist with one hand, and led him to the restaurant next door. Tanya, will never admit to an inexplicable failure. She stared at Zhao Peng and said, what are your concerns? Tell me clearly. I want to see what I can't bear. Alley entrance. I saw a good show. Jiangshi leaned lazily against the wall and chuckled. His eyes turned, thinking that this so-called blind date was most likely deliberately arranged by Tanya, with just a little trick. Zhao Peng was in a turmoil for half a day because of this little rumor. TSK. This scheme. If Zhao Peng really gets together with that woman, he will be controlled by her? Jiangshi was halfway laughing, staring at Mo Zhao's position. And suddenly, he couldn't laugh anymore. He thought again. In this blind date drama, wouldn't Mo Zhao, who was specially brought by Tanya, be redundant? Jiangshi narrowed his eyes slightly. His expression was stern. Tanya didn't say it, but Jiangshi knew that she didn't like him. That woman wanted Mo Zhao to go her separate ways and put aside the relationship. Maybe Tanya's blind date today was fake, and Mo Zhao's blind date was real. Jiangshi put down the electronic newspaper, walked to the corner, and looked over. Suddenly, his eyes condensed. Another person entered the Tianyuan restaurant. He took off his usual white coat and looked like a decent person. He walked straight to Mo Zhao's table and sat down. Chu Wen-zai. The appearance of this person made Jiangshi's face almost instantly gloomy. In the Tianyuan restaurant, Mo Zhao, who was still snorting and staring at the box where Tanya and Zhao Peng entered, was suddenly startled. God Chu? She looked at the person sitting opposite and asked in surprise. Why are you here? Blind date. Chu Wen-zai put a bouquet of flowers in the vase next to him. Just gently fiddled with it. It looked leisurely and beautiful. Mo Zhao widened his eyes and chuckled. Blind date. Could it be that you were the one who was supposed to have a blind date with Sister Ye? After saying that, she shook her head and sighed. Alas. My father who worries about nothing. She just complained a few words, and then heard Chu Wen-zai instructing the waiter to add a cup of fruit tea for her, and smiled slightly. No. It's with you. Mo Zhao was choked again. Seeing Chu Wen-zai smiled faintly, and said nothing. Mo Zhao suppressed her surprise and whispered, with me? Are you sure? Of course. Chu Wen-zai laughed. When have you ever seen me so careless that I can make a mistake in the blind date? Seeing that this situation did not seem to be fake, Mo Zhao remained silent. Although Mo Yuanping had been whispering in her ear that he wanted to arrange a blind date for her, Mo Zhao had never taken it seriously. Unexpectedly, she was still considering her words. Suddenly, I heard Chu Wen-zai on the other side say, don't rush to refuse. Xiao Mo. We have known each other for so many years, and know each other inside out. Chu Wen-zai has always felt that a stable relationship must be good enough to know each other well, and make long-term considerations to ensure that it can rationally deal with any accidents that may happen in the future. He likes to live in rules, and hates losing control. If it weren't for his aging and his mother who depended on him for everything has been urging him recently, Chu and Jo would probably not have seriously considered this matter so early. We have a good understanding since we were in college. And we are very suitable. He smiled. I can be sure that I like you more than other women. Chapter 325 Two Men at Loggerheads. Mo Xiao stared at Chu Wenze. He was a man with few emotions. Many people thought he was cold. But after years of getting along and working together, Mo Xiao always felt that he was a very comfortable person to get along with. Today's words may not be common expressions of confession, but it is easy for people to feel the sincerity in the words. But? Mo Xiao burst into laughter, shook the free teacup and said, God Chu, I believe you made this decision after careful consideration. But have you ever thought that I am a semi-infected person, and I may not live long? She blinked and jokingly said, such a big risk. Is it really appropriate? Chu Wenze looked at Mo Xiao, who was sitting across the table. She had no shame on her face, and was relaxed and at ease. Although she was wearing casual clothes, she could vaguely see that she had a sense of control over the situation after being in a high position for a long time. She just regarded herself as a friend. Chu Wenze lowered his eyes and pushed his glasses subconsciously. But he felt that everything was in the hands of man, and he could strive for it and slowly get used to it in the future. Chu Wenze smiled lightly. I work in the Tianyan laboratory and am also a member of this project. I naturally know it. I think you will recover. This is just his judgment, and things may not necessarily go in the direction he judges. But Chu Wenze has always been very confident in his judgment. Mo Xiao sighed. Chu Wenze looked at her hesitant look and suddenly said seriously, Mo Xiao, if we are together, not only will both parents feel at ease, but our future life will also be smooth and stable. And we don't need to worry about some uncontrollable factors. Mo Xiao blinked and was about to speak. An obscure voice suddenly came from behind. Oh, what is an uncontrollable factor? The voice seemed to ask kindly with a smile. But the tone was slow and light, which made people's scalp tingling. Jiangxi? Mo Xiao looked back. Why are you here? She frowned as she looked at his legs that could not walk freely. I came out for a walk and passed by. Jiangxi walked to the table with a smile, patted her head, took her fruit tea and took a sip. Then he slowly looked at Chu Wenze, seeing that all old classmates are here. I came in to take a look. He smiled meaningfully. It's a class reunion. Everyone who sees it will be there. It's not a class reunion. Chu Wenze glanced at the fruit teacup he had drunk and said lightly, it's a blind date. Oh! Jiangxi seemed to have heard a funny joke and almost laughed out loud. After a while, he waved his hand, dragged his remaining body to pick up a chair, sat down, put his legs down, and said lazily, what kind of rare thing is a blind date? I want to see it. I'm free. Let's go together. Chu Wenze and Mo Xiao choked at the same time. I've never seen three people ABC go on a blind date at the same time. The key is that according to the arrangement of two groups of two, AC, BC, there are still three ways for three people to go on a blind date. No wonder Mo Xiao and Chu Wenze are both having a headache, because Jiangxi is really not a person who plays by the rules. I saw him sitting in the middle seat with a smile on his face, and he used the shiny plate to tidy up his appearance. Then he rested his elbows on the table, leaned his head with one hand, leaned forward slightly, and stared at Chu Wenze with a smile. His eyes were tender, and his peach blossom eyes were particularly moving. If you don't know, you would think that he and Chu Wenze are a pair of resentful lovers. Jiangxi left his back to Mo Xiao. There were three people at the table, and Mo Xiao seemed to be completely isolated. It was clearly a movie for three people, but Mo Xiao once again felt that he seemed a little redundant. Mo Xiao subconsciously found it funny. Jiangxi had been like this since he was a child. Sometimes he was really childish. He had never lost in terms of disgusting people. While he was amused, a complex and inexplicable emotion rose in his heart. Chu Wenze's eyebrows opposite him had already frowned unconsciously. As a straight man, anyone who was stared at by such a face and such eyes would probably get goosebumps unconsciously. Even though Chu Wenze had great self-control, he was still silent for a long time. He pushed his glasses, took a deep breath, and then slowly said, Captain Jiang, some things can't be obtained by throwing a tantrum? That makes sense. Jiangxi said with a smile. It's better to steal when someone is not paying attention. Chu Wenze narrowed his slender eyes slightly. The lenses reflected the faint light, staring straight at him. It's not as good as the spiritual victory of the thief, who arbitrarily regarded the ownerless things as his own. Ownerless things? Jiangxi's amber eyes flashed coldly, and then chuckled. Some people are fortunately not in power. Otherwise the legislature will suffer, and the legal interpretation can be determined by his random words. Some people will find out even if they are in power that the rules are not what they say. Chu Wenze said lightly. It is not possible to do everything as he pleases. But it is easy for him to change the mountains, rivers, sun and moon within the scope of his power. Jiangxi's eyes were bright, and her voice was becoming gentler. Chu Wenze raised his thin eyebrows slightly. Even though he never acted impulsively, he was aroused at this moment. It just so happens that I have been living underground for a long time. I want to see what the new sky looks like. Jiangxi's sword-like eyebrows sank, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. With a strong murderous intent, I have never heard of such a request. But I have always been generous and responsive to requests. I always have to satisfy people. After saying that, he was about to wave back and call the plainclothes guards hiding in the dark. There was a sudden clang on the table. Jiangxi and Chu Wenze were both startled and looked in the direction of the sound. Mo Xiao put the empty fruit teacup heavily on the table with one hand. With one hand, he picked up the cane that Jiangxi had placed beside him when he came, stuffed it into his arms, and said in a deep voice, "Get out." Jiangxi's pupils shrank suddenly, and he slowly tightened his cane. "What did you say?" "Jiangxi, today is a matter between Chushan and me. Please get out first." Chu Wenze lowered his eyes, and did not look at the face of the man at the table. The expression of someone who was so arrogant just now must be very exciting at this moment. Jiangxi looked at Mo Xiao, and her dark and round eyes always looked at people so seriously and sincerely. Jiangxi used to like looking into her eyes, as if they were all the most sincere and open scenery in the world. But when this seriousness and sincerity was said to himself, the word "get out," especially when he made a choice between him and Chu Wenze, the more sincere you are, the more chilling your heart becomes. Jiangxi suddenly covered his chest, and for a moment he felt a stinging pain that almost made him bow his head. If he didn't leave, Jiangxi was afraid that he would no longer be able to control his anger. His face was as gloomy as water, and he walked out of the restaurant with a cane at a speed that was completely unlike that of a patient. He left in anger, feeling angry and painful in his heart. When he came to his senses, he realized that the underlying color was deep sadness. He visited the ward every day in his busy schedule, and the laughter, anger and scolding returned to the past. It turned out to be a dream. Jiangxi didn't go far after all, and stopped at the entrance of the alley. He leaned against the wall and sat down slowly, his hair hanging down slightly, covering his eyebrows and eyes, and his jaw had a delicate and cold arc, like a lonely stone statue in the shadow. Chapter 326 next time. Let's meet again in the sunshine. In the Tianyuan restaurant, Mo Xiao looked at Chu Wenze opposite him and whispered, "God Chu, I'm sorry. I brought you trouble. It's not your fault." "Xiao Mo." Chu Wenze smiled slightly and said softly, "The trouble is there. Not anyone brought it." His gentleness made Mo Xiao fall into silence again. Chu Wenze was very stable, and naturally changed a cup for Mo Xiao and added new tea. He continued to say, "Xiao Mo, we can try." Mo Xiao looked straight at him and smiled. "Sorry. No. Do you want to choose him?" Chu Wenze pushed his glasses and asked with a frown. Mo Xiao was silent and did not answer. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that she and Jiangxi had very different positions, identities and concepts. This was one of the reasons why Chu Wenze dared to ask without hesitation. Mo Xiao's silence satisfied him. As long as he would not be chosen, no one would be more suitable than himself. "Xiao Mo, choose me. Your future life will be smoother." "I know. Maybe." Mo Xiao laughed. "But I can't." Chu Wenze was startled and asked softly, "Why?" "Because I will feel guilty." She pursed her lips and sighed. This sigh came from the bottom of her heart, as if she finally admitted that there will always be some obstacles in life that can never be overcome. Chu Wenze's grip on the cup tightened slightly. Mo Xiao walked out of the Tianyuan restaurant. She was lost in thought as she stared at the streetlights. When she rejected Chu Wenze, she suddenly realized that she had rejected everyone, and that reason. Mo Xiao's eyes flashed, and she suddenly saw a cane lying on the ground at the entrance of the alley, with a part sticking out from the corner. At the entrance of the alley, Jiangxi sat on the ground with his back against the wall like a homeless person. Motionless. If passers-by took a closer look, it would be hard to believe that such a decadent person could be the arrogant and lofty Legion commander. People came and went on the street over there. Jiangxi didn't know what he was waiting for sitting here. He was like a traveler who was carefully holding the last ray of precarious candle in the wind, wandering in the darkness. Suddenly, a familiar voice sounded in front of him. Why haven't you gone back yet? Mo Xiao lowered his head and frowned at Jiangxi, who was sitting alone, and his legs that were wrapped like sausages. His injuries haven't healed yet. Why are you running around? Wasn't he so majestic when he threatened people just now? Why did he always make himself look so pitiful when he turned around? She couldn't help but sigh. Jiangxi looked at her in a daze, and then glanced behind her. She was the only one. No one else. He watched Mo Xiao squat down and whisper something in his ear. Jiangxi didn't hear it clearly, but he turned his head and saw a thin man staring at the door of the restaurant. His eyes were confused and lost. That look was definitely not what a winner should have. Jiangxi's chest suddenly beat like a drum, and he breathed a sigh of relief, looking at Mo Xiao who was so close. His eyes gradually brightened. Jiangxi? Are you listening to me? Mo Xiao half squatted beside him and said speechlessly, Get up quickly. I'll help you go back. As soon as the voice fell, suddenly, a head rested on her shoulder. Gently, lonely, relieved, and silent. Mo Xiao's body suddenly stiffened. She heard a sigh-like voice softly ringing in her ear. Mo Xiao. My leg hurts. Slightly hoarse, and a little aggrieved. Mo Xiao clenched her teeth and looked down at the head below her sight. Sometimes she really felt that he was particularly hateful. Hated his cold-bloodedness. Hated his arrogance. Hated his wildness. Hated his recklessness. Hated his recklessness. And wished to slap him to death. However, when she raised her hand and put it down, it just gently fell on his head and patted it. And even her tone became gentle. I know. Go back. Next time. Don't run around before your injury is healed. I said I would visit the patient. And I will definitely go. Help him pick up the crutches. He carefully helped him up from the ground. And Mo Xiao couldn't help but retort, You deserve it. Don't you? I was here with Sister Ya for a blind date today. Why did you suddenly come in and get angry with Chushin? The two people's backs and the sound of their arguments gradually faded away. Chu and Zhe stood at the entrance of the alley, staring at the backs of the two people supporting each other, silent and speechless. Although they bumped and argued all the way, they never let go of their hands supporting each other. Under the light, the shadows of the two stretched behind them and gradually merged into a line. Chu and Zhe stared at the beam of light and shadow, then looked down at the beam under his feet, feeling empty in his heart, and for the first time felt a little lost. A few days later, the cleanup of the defense line of the Tian'an base has been almost completed. On this day, Mo Xiao organized the troops in the wild grass camp, preparing to lead the troops to station on the ground for a period of time to assist the workers in building the 6th radiation protection barrier. Of course, their main task is to protect the safety of the workers and building facilities and prevent the invasion of external dangers. Following Qin Zhao's intention, she discussed the cooperation matters with Jiang Shi in the conference room. Perhaps it was because of Shenqi's incident, or perhaps the base entered a new chapter of development. Jiang Shi had other deeper considerations and plans. In short, with him taking the lead, the original hostility between the wild grass camp and the border guards was reduced a lot. Of course, cooperation is not integration, and the two sides still maintain a clear boundary, because they will be stationed for a long time this time. Many of Mo Xiao's friends brought their families to see her off before she left the base. Of course, many people stared at her with hopeful eyes. They all knew that when Mo Xiao returned, she would probably bring good news that they could return to the ground. Sister Mo, how many days can we succeed? 5 days? Sun Yangyang asked with a smile. Mo Xiao rolled her eyes. How about we switch positions? I will sell you goods for 5 days, and you will build the radiation protection barrier for me within 5 days. Okay? That won't work. Sun Yangyang laughed and patted the top of the head of a little kid in front of him. This little kid is anxious. She asked me to ask. Not me. Sun Yangyang immediately raised her hands to prove her innocence, and she felt no guilt in putting the blame on a little girl who was only a few years old. Mo Xiao looked down and saw a shy little girl holding Sun Yangyang's trouser legs, carefully looking at her with her only remaining intact eye. Not only her eyes were problematic, her nose was also like a holy pocket, and her nostrils were not in the right place. Judging from her appearance and age, this child was obviously a deformed child born after the apocalypse. Mo Xiao smiled and joked, "Guamingri, what's wrong today? What do you want me to bring you back?" "Captain Mo, Teacher Gua said that the ceiling outside is blue. Is it true?" Seeing that everyone's eyes were looking at him, Guamingri mustered up the courage and asked loudly. She is Shui Cancan's niece. She has always heard Shui Cancan call Mo Xiao Captain Mo. So she has always followed her uncle to call him that. Shui Cancan has corrected her several times, but she still can't change. Fortunately, Mo Xiao doesn't care about these empty words. Of course. Mo Xiao touched her little head and smiled. Although it appears less frequently now. One day, there will be more and more. Guamingri's eyes were bright. What about the sun that Teacher Gua mentioned? Which is bigger? The big ceiling lamp on the central street? Can you bring me a sun when you come back this time? Childish words and funny things. The adults around laughed when they heard it. Guamingri knew that he was being laughed at. So he quickly covered his nose and shrank his head behind Sun Yangyang's trouser legs. Mo Xiao squatted down, pinched her cheeks, smiled crisply, and replied, "Okay. But the sun can't be taken down. I can only take you to see it." Guamingri nodded in confusion, although she didn't know why she couldn't put up a ladder to take down the sun, just like changing the ceiling lights on the central street every time. But she was still very happy when her request was promised. The only remaining eye narrowed with joy, revealing the teeth with braces. She had a bad habit of biting things since she was a child, which was very troublesome. Fortunately, after being trained and taught by a grandmother named Chu, she gradually changed. Mo Xiao said goodbye to everyone one by one. The funniest thing was that Zhao Peng and Tongya, who had been officially together a few days ago, were in a cold war after just 2 days of dating. They also needed Mo Xiao, a traveler who was about to leave, to enlighten them, after solving a lot of problems. Mo Xiao sighed. Who said it before? She is really a life of worrying. However, in this end of the world, being able to worry about the trivialities of life is a kind of happiness. People are reborn in the faith of ashes, not perish, which is the meaning of her and their persistence. Mo Xiao waved goodbye to everyone and just walked a few steps. I found someone leaning against the wall waiting at the door. Jiangxi? Mo Xiao raised his eyebrows. Why? Are you afraid that I will occupy all the advantageous locations outside because I am close to the water? You are so bold. Jiangxi glanced at her equipment and smiled after confirming that it was correct. Wait up there. We, the border guards, can't let your wild grass camp take the limelight in everything. Waiting? Mo Xiao glanced at his leg that had not yet fully recovered and laughed. How long will you wait? Don't wait until I've completed my mission before you come to cut the ribbon. The mocking implication was very obvious. Jiangxi didn't care, patted her head and said, Go. Be careful. Mo Xiao shrugged, pulled his hand down with disdain, and turned away neatly. When have I ever made you wait for a long time? There were faint whispers behind him. Mo Xiao's lips curled up. His steps were windy, and the hem of his coat seemed to come alive. The people behind him looked on without moving. She seemed to often leave them with a brave and determined back like this, and rushed to the front herself. But she, including them, knew that she was not alone. Each of them is working silently in their respective industries and positions, fighting for a better tomorrow for everyone. All the paths lead to the same destination. Xiao Mo, we are waiting for you to come back. Someone shouted behind him. Mo Xiao smiled, without looking back, raised his arms, and waved them back vigorously in response. Next time, let's meet again in the sun. Extra, I was young at that time, and I look back with regret. Donghu City, 10 o'clock in the evening. The streets are still very prosperous, with a constant flow of people. The high-rise buildings on both sides, reflected by the neon lights, look like giant beasts lurking in the dark. In such a feasting and revelry atmosphere, a pale and thin boy, carrying a school bag, ran quickly on the street. He was panting heavily, although he tried his best to hold on. His speed gradually slowed down. It seems that he is exhausted and has reached his limit. Xiabu Mian, why are you running so fast? We are classmates, and we won't eat you. Behind him, someone in a car easily caught up with him. looked at his embarrassed appearance, and laughed wantonly, being forced into a dead end. The boy who was running away in front stopped and looked back at the approaching person with a gloomy look. There were 3 boys on the opposite side, about the same age as him. One of them, like him, was wearing the uniform of Donghu No. 1 Middle School. The other 2 were wearing the uniform of No. 7 Middle School. The one who just spoke was the one wearing the uniform of No. 1 Middle School. He stood in the front, leading a huge wolfhound, and seemed to be the leader of the 3. Run! Why don't you run? The one leading the dog looked ahead, with a cat teasing a mouse, laughing teasingly. Then, he loosened the rope. The wolfhound under his feet didn't know what instructions it got, but it suddenly lowered its limbs, barked in a low voice, and showed its white fangs to the front. Huang Wei, don't go too far. The boy who was forced into a corner took off his school bag, clenched the strap with his pale 5 fingers, and took a defensive posture. Too far? Huang Wei laughed softly, turned around and asked the boys in the uniforms of No. 7 Middle School on both sides, Am I too far? What did I do? Xia Bumian, don't be so ungrateful. We are classmates, and I just want to reminisce with you. One of the students in the uniforms of No. 7 Middle School raised his eyebrows. Yes, Xiao Xie. Another person with an honest face helped persuade. We went to the same school in elementary and junior high school. Don't you trust me? Reminisce? Xia Bumian laughed softly, raised his eyes, and his expression was full of sarcasm. Don't you just want me to withdraw from the special recruitment of Jiangda this time? Hearing him speak so directly, the 3 people on the opposite side were stunned. The young man named Huang Wei was the first to react. His face turned cold, and he said in a contemptuous tone, Since you know everything, I won't beat around the bush with you. In a word, how much do you want? It was originally a humiliating sentence, but Xia Bumian pulled the corner of his mouth and stared at him strangely. How much money is okay? Huang Wei didn't expect him to be so sensible today, and smiled. As long as you are willing to give up the quota, then give me Longren Hospital, Xia Bumian said softly. His eyes were sarcastic. Huang Wei was stunned, and then he became furious. Longren Hospital is the foundation of his family business. Xia Bumian's casual remark was to find out his family's background. Seeing Huang Wei's ugly expression, the thin young man who was cornered couldn't help but laugh softly. Even though he was forced into a desperate situation and was alone, he still dared to add fuel to the fire, and there was a hint of hysteria in his bones. The laughter echoed in the dim alley, like a crisp slap on Huang Wei's face. His face instantly became extremely gloomy. Ah! Huang Wei cried out softly, as if he was careless, and the rope loosened. The wolfhound under his feet seemed to have received some instructions, and rushed forward. In the dark alley, a huge shadow came towards him. Xia Bumian's pupil shrank, and he grabbed the bag strap with his 5 fingers and smashed it forward. The wolf dog screamed and fell to the ground, but it was thick-skinned and quickly got up. It seemed to be enraged and bit the bag. The man and the dog were pulling each other. Huang Wei's fake voice sounded in the alley. Oh! Hongfu is so disobedient. Why did he run away? It's all my fault. Why don't you two find Hongfu back quickly? What if he bites someone? Don't worry, Brother Wei. We will go over and bring Hongfu back. Xia Hongfu. Let go! Let go! The other 2 laughed and stepped forward. Xia Bumian seemed to be extremely angry when he heard this. His eyes turned slightly red, and even his fingertips were trembling. Shut up. What's wrong? Xia Bumian? One person asked in surprise. We are calling our own dog. Don't be ungrateful. Just after saying this, he pretended to be in a daze and said, Oh, I almost forgot. Your lame grandfather who depends on each other for life is also called Xia Hongfu? When the name Hongfu was called, the dog that had just been thrown off the ground suddenly responded with a woof. The man burst into laughter and continued to shout, Hongfu! Woof! Xia Hongfu! Woof woof! Ha 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 ha! The man and the dog were funny, but Xia Bumian was trembling all over. The overwhelming anger finally made him abandon his remaining rationality. He took out a folding knife from his pocket and rushed towards the man and the dog. Fuck! You still have this thing. Good. Much more courageous than before. The man was not panicked and easily avoided it. He was tall and had been in the same class with Xia Bumian in junior high school. He knew that he was weak and sickly. Now he was just showing off his violence. Hongfu. The wolf dog turned around and bit Xia Bumian's arm. The person next to him immediately stepped forward to grab the knife. He was strong, and the folding knife quickly changed hands. The knife had fallen into his hand, but Xie Bumian looked like he didn't care about life and death, and was not afraid of his sneak attack from behind. Instead, he concentrated on pinching the wolf dog's neck with both hands, trying to strangle the dog to death, and he would not let go no matter how others punched and kicked him. At this time, the classmate with an honest face sighed, "Xiao Xia, let go quickly. Let us take Hung Fu away. Otherwise it will go crazy and get out of control." Every word seemed to be for the sake of the old classmate who was fighting with the dog. Xie Bumian seemed to be crazy, and did not listen to the advice at all. "I told you to shut up." Oh Huan Wei, who was recording with his mobile phone, pretended to be surprised and shouted, "Someone is beating someone." In the dark alley, where the neon lights could not illuminate, no one knew the cause and effect. I saw several high school boys fighting each other. It was almost midnight, and this place was remote, so fewer and fewer people passed by. Even if someone passed by occasionally, they would walk in a hurry, too lazy to cause trouble. At the same time, on the sidewalk more than 100 meters away from the alley, a man and a woman walked side by side. Judging from their age and dress, they should be college students nearby. The girl had natural curly short hair that reached her neck, and she was very beautiful. Her eyes were round and black, and she was full of energy when she turned around, making her look energetic at midnight. The weather was cold, and it seemed that snow was about to fall in the sky. She wore gloves and kept blowing air with her mouth, rubbing her hands while blowing air, and her whole face was almost buried in the white mist. Seeing her like this, the boy walking side by side with her couldn't help laughing. "Do you know you're cold?" He raised his eyebrows, smiling in his eyes, his pupils like a piece of transparent amber. "Especially beautiful." "Nonsense." The girl couldn't help rolling her eyes after hearing this. "We are all flesh and blood. Aren't you cold? You still know that you are just flesh and blood?" The boy sneered, taking advantage of his height advantage to pat her head like a puppy. It seems that lying in the hospital for so long this time was not in vain, and finally got something. "Look, this is a bad mouth, isn't it? Is this what you should say to a patient who has just been discharged from the hospital?" The girl had no choice just now, and as he patted her, her head was forced to nod like a chicken pecking at rice. At this moment, she couldn't bear it anymore, and angrily slapped his hand away. Sneered, "What's wrong with lying in the hospital? It's another good thing to be discharged in a minute." At this point, she paused slightly. It seems that using man is not right? When the words came to her lips, she subconsciously changed from good man to good woman. It's another good woman to be discharged in a minute. It's a bit strange. Forget it. Just use it for now. It's normal for a science and engineering girl to be short of words for a while. The girl blinked, and the declaration landed with a sonorous and powerful voice. Puff. Seeing her proud and heroic appearance, listening to her a good woman declaration, the boy next to her couldn't stop laughing anymore, holding his stomach with one hand and wiping the corners of his eyes with the other hand, and laughed out loud. He has a nice voice, and even his laughter can make people feel comfortable. Of course, if this laughter is not mocking her. The girl poked him with her elbow with a dark face. "I'll make you laugh to death." After saying that, she sulked, quickened her pace, and walked forward. It is definitely impossible to enter the dormitory building at this time. When she returns to school later, she will have to bite the bullet and knock on the window or call the aunt to open the door. When she thought of the dormitory aunt who was known as the Iron-Faced Fairy, she felt a chill from her back, and her steps unconsciously quickened a bit. After walking a few steps, white flocks suddenly fell from the sky. Just now I said it was going to snow, and now it's really snowing. It's really rare to see snow in Donghu City. This winter is too cold. The girl rubbed her hands and paused. Just then, something suddenly covered her from behind. A black coat, still with a hint of warm body temperature and an inexplicable fragrance. It's a men's size, and a tall man over 1.8 meters wears a medium-length coat. Not to mention her, the hem almost drags on the ground, but now it wraps her up completely, which makes her feel much warmer. The girl looked back. She saw the boy put his hands in his pockets unhurriedly, lowered his eyebrows and looked at her, with a nasty smile on his lips. "Don't worry. This one is cheap. You don't have to pay for it if it gets dirty." The girl's first second of feeling touched was instantly wiped out. She pulled off the coat, threw it into his hands, and said with a gritted teeth, "Since it's so cheap, I'll leave it to you. After all, there's a lot of fabric, and it's covered so you don't get wet when you play in the snow later." Using the word play doesn't seem to be a good description, judging from her eyes. Maybe she's comparing the people around her to animals. Maybe it's a dog playing in the snow. She's calling him a dog. The boy smiled softly, but he wasn't angry. He lazily put the coat on the railing next to him. "Let's go." After that, he walked forward first. This winter coat was thrown away as if it was just a trivial piece of garbage. The girl was stunned. She knew the family background of the man opposite her very well. Ordinary people's coats were very expensive. How could the one he wore be cheap? Maybe 5 figures? Maybe 6 figures? It couldn't be 7 figures. Right? The girl was not sure. Her poor imagination couldn't imagine it. But it was a lot of money after all. "Huh. Just throw it away. Do you think I will help you pick it up?" The girl muttered and ran away. She had only taken 2 steps. She sighed, turned around, and hugged the coat in her arms. There was no way. Once this stingy character was formed, it would be really fatal. She really didn't feel sorry for the clothes. She felt sorry for the money. "Are you crazy? You just throw away so much money?" She ran a few steps holding the clothes, and quickly caught up with the boy in front. It turned out that the other party had stopped walking, and was standing there waiting for her. There was a smile in his eyes, as if he had expected that this would happen with her personality. Dog. What a dog. The girl was so angry that she seemed to hear a dog barking. Woof. Hiss. Look. I'm so angry that I'm hallucinating. Woof woof. Stop barking. Woof woof woof. Not hallucination? The girl was stunned, walked a few steps to the source of the barking, and looked over. A very dark alley. Ordinary people may need to spend some effort to see clearly, but she had excellent eyesight since she was a child, and she could see the situation inside clearly at a glance. There were several high school boys fighting inside, or 3 against 1. Oh no! There was a dog. The boy who was beaten was thin, with a bruised face and blood all over his face. He was fighting between 3 people and a dog, and he almost never stood up straight. He was hit by a punch here and a kick there, and there were many bites on his body. The blue and white school uniforms that symbolized youth and hope were all splashed with blood. The girl's eyes widened suddenly. Is this school violence? She was furious and wanted to rush out immediately. Before she left, her wrist was suddenly grabbed by someone. What are you doing? She looked at the boy who was blocking her and glared. What are you doing? The boy glanced at the movement in the alley and asked calmly. You just came out of the hospital and want to go in again? A while ago. He ate a Shaxian Kung Fu and was sent to the hospital. He is really unique. He is always worrying. Didn't you see someone bullying a classmate in front of you? The girl narrowed her eyes and said softly, At this time, do you want me to turn a blind eye? After that, she shook off the boy's hand and said without looking back, Remember to call the police. I knew I couldn't persuade you. The boy who was thrown away sighed helplessly and took out his mobile phone from his pocket while following him. In the dark alley, the boy who was beaten by 3 people has curled up on the ground and fainted, and can no longer get up. Huang Wei stood up, wiped the blood grooves on his face that he scratched fiercely with his fingertips, and spat blood on him. Damn it. I underestimated you. You're getting stronger and stronger. After saying that, he was still not satisfied and kicked him hard again. The kick hit the abdomen, and the boy groaned in pain. He was kicked awake again. He grabbed the ground with 5 fingers, moved, and tried to stand up again. However, the pain all over his body made him tremble and barely sit up against the wall even if he tried his best. Xia, you don't really think you can resist me, do you? Huang Wei's eyes flashed, holding the dog leash and laughing. Guess why my dog is called Xia Hongfu? He saw the boy on the ground suddenly raised his head, with an expression that he wanted to drink his blood, and laughed. What a coincidence. Your grandfather is a cleaner in my hospital. Xia Bumian was stunned. Grandpa just said happily that he found a cleaning job and went out early every day. But it turned out that he was cleaning in the hospital? Huang Wei shook his head, an old man who is also a cripple. If it weren't for your relationship, I wouldn't take him in. You are really shameless. You dare to apply for the job. It seems that your Xia family is of the same lineage. Oh, by the way, guess what? I just got this dog on the day of the recruitment. I named it in front of your grandfather. And your grandfather had to bow and smile. Just because I offered him a salary 2,000 higher than others. It's just 2,000 yuan. Ha ha ha. 2,000 yuan can make someone a dog. Huang Wei laughed wildly. Is your family short of money? But I see you are very rich today. Could it be that all the wealth of your Xie family is spent on one person? Ha ha. Oh. That's right. A poor man can barely make ends meet. And he dares to compete with me for a place. Every time he said a word, the boy opposite him became more angry and painful. Huang Wei seemed to appreciate his pain and watched with relish for a while. Then he took a few steps back. His eyes turned cold and said, if you know what's good for you, give me the place at Jiang University. Otherwise, I can't guarantee your grandfather's high-paying job. He emphasized the word high salary on purpose. The implication is that your grandpa, who is such a coward, must value it very much. If you don't want your grandpa to be sad and miserable, you should know what to do. Right? After teaching him a lesson, Huang Wei's mood finally improved. He turned around and left with the dog. He had heard that the grandfather and grandson had a very good relationship. And Xie Bumian would not abandon his grandfather. This classmate Xie, because of his excellent grades in school, often steals his limelight. Huang Wei specially investigated his family background. He knew that his parents divorced when he was young, and later his father died in an accident at the construction site. Such a background is simply a template for the poor, and there is nothing to care about. Most people's fate is determined from birth. He walked with the corners of his lips raised. However, after a few steps, he was suddenly stunned. He saw a girl suddenly walking in the shadows in front of him, with a gloomy face. She only glanced at him, and was about to pass by him. Judging from her appearance and clothes, she should be just an ordinary college student. It was so late. Why was she walking alone into this dead end? Could she be here to do something righteous? A woman? To do something righteous? Huang Wei was amused by his own thoughts. Not to mention, this woman is pretty. He was used to being arrogant, so he stretched out his hand to stop her. What are you doing? Beautiful girl? Are you looking for me? I'm looking for him. The girl glanced at the boy covered in bruises in the corner and said lightly, looking for him? Huang Wei's eyes flashed. Do you know him? The girl suddenly turned around and stared at Huang Wei. After a long while, until Huang Wei felt a little weird and his scalp was numb, she turned her head and said in a low voice, I am his sister. Puff. Huang Wei really laughed this time. He felt that this woman was deliberately looking for trouble. Seeing that the man was about to pass by him, he suddenly reached out again, grabbed her wrist, and whispered, my beautiful lady, there is a dead end ahead. The girl also has a bad temper. In the dark alley late at night, facing several fierce men who had just experienced a fight, she was not afraid at all. Pa A slapped Huang Wei's hand away. Then, without waiting for everyone's reaction, she stepped forward to help the severely injured boy. Seeing the ugly face of the boy in front of her, she sneered, little brother from number 1 middle school. It's really amazing. High school students can learn to fight like hooligans? Don't worry. I have called the police. And your school teachers and classmates will soon know about your heroic deeds. Number 1 middle school is a famous school in the city. Unlike the 2 number 7 middle schools next to it, students who can go to number 1 middle school in Donghu are all top students in the city. Looking at his pretentious look, he should still have some face. She just overheard a few words. It seems that he is fighting for a place in Jiang University. In her opinion, this behavior is extremely childish. It's just a recruitment quota. If you fail, there's still the college entrance examination. There's a bit of personal grudge in fighting like this. After the girl finished speaking, she saw the boy holding the dog opposite her change color, and the hand holding the dog leash trembled and loosened slightly. TSK. You have Parkinson's disease at such a young age. You can't even hold a leash? A sarcastic voice sounded. At the same time, a hand with 5 slender fingers suddenly reached out from behind and quickly and accurately caught the dog leash. The wolf dog was ferocious. When it saw the dog leash fell into the hands of a stranger, it opened its mouth and wanted to bite. However, the new boy seemed to have a way to train dogs. The rope was loose at first, and when the dog opened its mouth to bite people, it suddenly tightened and lifted it. The wolfhound was strangled by the neck and screamed miserably. This happened several times. This bully learned his lesson and dared not to do anything again. Where did you come from? seeing one or two people coming out to meddle in other people's business for no reason. Huang Wei got angry and was about to scold them. But a beam of light shone on the boy who was training the dog. It turned out that the two students from number 7 middle school turned on the flashlight on their mobile phones at the first time. What? In the dim light, the boy lowered his eyes to look at Huang Wei. His sword eyebrows slightly raised, and a lazy smile on his face. Do you want to teach me? Seeing his face clearly, Huang Wei froze suddenly, and the words he blurted out were choked in his throat. Judging from his expression, he seemed to recognize this man. The boy looked at his suddenly silent cowardly look, and sighed, looking him up and down with a sarcastic look. Do you know me? Huang Wei's fists tightened slightly under his sleeves. This man may not know him, but he does know him. After all, his father taught him, since he was a child, which people should not be easily provoked. During his frozen time, the boy opposite glanced at the boy leaning against the wall with his head down in the dark alley. And suddenly, his eyes flickered. He also seemed to let go of his hand, as if his hand was shaking. And the rope came off. When the boy stepped forward, he seemed to accidentally kick the dog. The dog was kicked by him, accidentally, to the side of the boy who was hanging his head and motionless. It was just a moment. Before anyone could react, the young man had already thrust the knife he had just retrieved from someone into the dog's neck. Blood gushed out. It splattered all over his head and face again. In this dark alley, the thin young man looked like a demon. The girl standing nearby was stunned by the scene. She turned back in a daze. Huang Wei had already screamed and rushed over in anger. The other two students from number 7 middle school seemed to be frightened and froze in place. Among the people present, only one man could still laugh in a low voice, which sounded a bit nonchalant, as if he had just watched a good play and played a fun game. That's all. Although the blood and wounds on the ground were extremely scary, it didn't look funny at all. In the laughter, outside, the police car sirens arrived. The girl stopped Huang Wei, who rushed over. She was afraid that the emotional boy opposite would suddenly get up and kill people like killing dogs. Because the situation seemed serious, the police took everyone away temporarily. After taking the statement, the girl and the boy got up and prepared to leave. Before leaving, they saw the boy with bruises all over his body sitting alone on a chair. He should have been sent to the hospital, but for some reason, he was stubborn and refused to go, and was eager to go home. The girl couldn't bear it. She felt in her pocket and found a chocolate, walked over and handed it to him. The boy looked up and looked at her in astonishment. This woman must be seriously ill. Who in their right mind would rush in to save someone at that time? He thought it was ridiculous, and he wanted to laugh. She didn't reach out to take it for a long time. The girl frowned. Her face was covered with blood. Could it be that her brain was also covered with blood? Forget it. Looking at the character of the dog killer, he is not a guy who needs sympathy. She slapped the chocolate into the boy's hand with a smack and said lightly, "It's just Yongda. So just throw it away." What? Is it because our Dongda is not standing high enough? After that, she turned around and left. Xie Bumian stared at the strange woman's back. The boy next to the girl seemed to laugh at her. Mo Xiao. It seems that you have done something thankless again. And the other person didn't appreciate your kindness at all. That's enough. The girl seemed a little angry. If it weren't for you, would I have killed the dog? Did you see through it? The boy shrugged nonchalantly after being exposed for doing it on purpose. I'm still very young, and I have a long and bright future. The girl sighed. Do you think everyone is like you? A shady and wicked guy? The two seemed to be very familiar with each other, and used to quarreling with each other. The boy didn't care and just sarcastically said, "You haven't even been admitted to Dongda yet. And you're already a junior?" After saying that, he sped up, pulled an umbrella from the side, threw down a few red bills, opened it, and walked out in the wind and snow. Jiangxi. Wait for me. The girl was anxious and hurriedly chased after him. Put down your umbrella. Have some sense of public morality. Okay? Winter. Heavy snow night. The goose feathers were like rain. And even though it was far away, the sound of the two people quarreling could still be vaguely heard from the wind. Inside the police station. On the chair, the boy stared at the chocolate in his hand in a daze. Peel it off. Put it in his mouth. Thinking about what the man said just now. Dongda? Donghu University in this city? So sweet. He didn't like sweets. Frowned. And swallowed it after a while. It's so sweet. He really doesn't like sweets. However, Dongda University is worth a try. But now, he has to hurry up and leave. The boy looked at the sky and the clock. It was too late. He had to go home quickly. With such heavy snow, Grandpa would definitely come out to pick him up. If he didn't come, he would look for him everywhere. And Grandpa didn't have a mobile phone. The boy sneaked out. He ran all the way regardless of the pain. The wind whistled past his ears, and the hot air he exhaled blended with the snowflakes. And the air flowed danced together, like a spirit leaping in the dark night. Although the woman with a sense of justice was stupid, she was right in one sentence. He was still young and had a bright future. The boy ran faster and faster, as if he was about to fly. At the intersection, there were few pedestrians on the street. Suddenly, he stopped abruptly. In front of him, a truck was turning in the wind and snow. An old man who was anxiously crossing the road did not notice it. The world seemed to stop for a second. The boy could not tell whether it was the world that stopped for a second or his brain that stopped for a second. He only knew that everything turned upside down before and after this second. He lost the only love he had ever received in this world. This is a chaotic and mixed settlement of various small groups and small forces. This settlement has no walls and no management. Those who come and go are all gangster groups and vagrants. They trade, hunt each other, or gather together for warmth. In this cruel apocalypse, they are like rats in the gutter, lingering and living in misery. A clean house. This is the second floor. The doors and windows are closed, and even the gaps are sealed with tape, because mosquitoes have become carriers of the virus. This cautious way of handling has become commonplace after the apocalypse. At this moment, on the narrow single bed, a man suddenly woke up from his sleep. I dreamed about the past again. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the gray sky outside for a long time. It happened in high school. It was less than 10 years ago, but it seemed like a lifetime ago. Later, he really got admitted to the University of Tokyo. Met that person on campus. Or rather, those two people. They had long forgotten him. He had long been used to it. It seemed like this since birth. He was just a passerby in everyone's life. Who would have thought that fate would play tricks on people? The end of the world is coming. By chance, they became a team. He remembered the taste of blood, and every time the bloodthirsty impulse surged in his body, he would think of that night. It was obviously the coldest winter night. Picking up the butcher knife, the hot blood splashed on his face, and he seemed to tremble in his soul. Yes, trembling is the synonym of the bloodthirsty desire of the half-infected. So the first time, he was very sincere and did not restrain himself. If there is one, there will be 2, 3, 4, and countless times. Along the way, he has been wandering outside the boundaries of the crowd. He knows that he is different and will eventually be a passerby. But obviously, that stupid woman Mo Shao doesn't think so. She actually tried to persuade him to restrain himself. Restraint? Like that night? Xia Bumian thought it was ridiculous, and he wanted to laugh. But I don't know what kind of ridiculous psychology. For a while, he really tried to restrain himself, although it was difficult. Just like that night on the edge of the grassland, there was a group of wild wolves, and Jiangxi actually asked him to get off the car to confront the wolves. What did he say at the time? He said no. He was afraid of dogs. Yes, he was afraid. He was afraid that he could not restrain himself. He could not restrain the desire to kill dogs, skin and tear meat, just like he could not restrain the desire for blood. Afraid of dogs? How could he be afraid of dogs? What a joke. The funniest thing is still to come. He actually learned from that woman to restrain himself all the way. It was extremely difficult. Alas, stupidity is indeed contagious. It's just that fate likes to play tricks on people again and again. Before entering Nutaling, the man said that he treated him as a friend. He also thought that there would be a chance in the future. Maybe he could really. Well, he thought too much. When he woke up, he was already in prison, treated like a monster, and became an experimental subject. Fortunately, he seemed to be lucky again. He was rescued not long after staying there. Xia Bumian felt as if he was always being pushed by a force. He couldn't remember how many people he had killed, but he could recognize the disgusting, fearful and hostile eyes of those people looking at him. This time, they finally parted ways. He did not choose to go together. Perhaps, he was wrong before. Some extravagant hopes should not exist in people like him. It's time to choose a new path. Ridiculous. This new path did not last long. And it was not his path alone. On the way, he met a group of troops and refugees they escorted. Perhaps it was because of the hardships along the way that Lu Quanquan wanted to surrender. Xia Buxian sneered in his heart. Just watch. How is it possible? As human beings, they can torture and oppress each other. How can humans live in harmony with these bloodthirsty monsters? Sure enough, it was just as he expected. That night, Xia Buxian, who had planned to stand aside and watch, suddenly changed his mind and killed a person. A refugee. He thought he would never meet him again in his life, and thought he should have died in that disaster. Unexpectedly, he was rescued by the army. Among the group of people, Huang Wei, he killed again. In front of everyone. In a hunting way. In an extremely cruel way. This is good? At the moment when his blood gushed out, a thought suddenly popped up in his mind. There is no turning back. He can only go all the way to the end. In order to live. In order to survive. Accompanied by blood every day. The restlessness in his body became more and more obvious and frequent. Sometimes Xia Buxian couldn't tell whether he was staying near the sky eye to live or survive. Or did he want to see with his own eyes those people who were obviously half infected? Could the people on the other path finally walk towards the light? But that woman seemed to be born to run towards the light. Xia Buxian felt ridiculous again. He lost the last battle, so it should be over. And it should end here, he thought. However, Jiangxi actually let him live. He knew the man's character. And he knew it since the winter night of his senior year in high school. There was a demon in Jiangxi's heart. He deliberately let him go. Why? Xia Buxian instantly realized. Did he also release the demon in his heart? On the way to escape, the gloomy boy smiled for the first time. He really wanted to see the expressions of the group of people inside. Especially the expression of that woman. The smile did not reach the bottom of his eyes. And suddenly dimmed. It's a pity that I will never see it again. The dinner crowded together under the warm yellow wall lights of the RV makes people frown. The laughter of the noisy people in the car is annoying. And the troublesome teamwork and fighting side by side sound disgusting. I will never see it again. His life should not have these. This is the Sky Eye base. When the two siblings Xiang Feng and Xiang Yu first came in, they almost danced with joy. There are still many handsome and high-quality little brothers alive. Well, the future of mankind is really bright. Xiang Yu thought happily. Alas, I am so sad to be separated from the beautiful young ladies. But it doesn't matter. We will see each other again soon. Xiang Feng thought happily. With his superb archery skills. Are you still afraid that he can't enter the wild grass camp? The two of them were like Lu Laoao entering the Grandview Garden. Grinning all the way. But soon, they couldn't laugh anymore. Uncle Gua didn't allow them to join the army and sent them back to school. He said that they were still children and should go back to school to receive education first. Damn it! Why do we have to study when the world is about to end? I just couldn't study after a few days. Damn it! What's the point of studying? Middle school students should turn over the table to save the world. Xiangfeng secretly joined the army without telling Xiangyu. And Xiangyu secretly signed up without telling Xiangfeng. The two siblings were dumbfounded when they met in the recruit camp of the Tianjin Border Guard. During their days in the recruit camp, they heard many stories about adults. The most common ones, in addition to the magical wild grass camp that only recruited semi-infected people, were the blood hunting group and the rising star, Jiangxi. Yeah, isn't that brother Shi? They know each other. However, this name has gradually been given a layer of mythical color in various stories. The people who were familiar to me before seemed to become strangers gradually drifting away. So far away that they were in the same base. But they seemed to be worlds apart. Even Uncle Guo was the same. The two siblings were angry with him, and had never told him about their enlistment. They were holding their breath to give him a surprise. Ha ha. Maybe it was a shock. In any case, the look on Uncle Guo's face would be very exciting at that time. The two siblings were overjoyed when they thought of this. Unfortunately, they didn't wait until then, but waited for the news of Uncle Guo's death. He died? Uncle Guo, who had always taken care of them like a father and a brother in that doomsday, died? How could it be? Didn't they arrive at the Sky Eye base? Wasn't it a shelter? Wasn't it safe? How could it be? The two stood at a loss under the Yongjin monument, as if they had just realized that there were so many names here. They saw the newest one at a glance. Guo Weiman. Death is cold and unreal. They didn't see the body. and they refused to believe that Uncle Guo was dead. Until time. After a long absence, time will always tell these children, who should grow up, that someone has left forever. Year after year, the list on the monument will increase every year. The brother and sister often stop there to watch. The name they see the most is still Guo Weiman. Until one day, they found a woman who was in a state of dismay. It's been a long time since we last met. They recognized her. Maybe she had forgotten them. But her name could be heard by them through various stories at all times. They had seen her high spirits before going to war in the army, and her clothes fluttering in the wind when she returned in the crowd of people along the street. She was dressed in the uniform of the wild grass camp, and her body was always straight, making her like an indestructible sword. But at this moment, the sword seemed to be wailing. They had never seen her so confused, hesitant, and helpless. It turned out that people as strong as mountains would also be on the verge of collapse. Xiang Feng and Xiang Yu didn't know what kind of mood they were in when they returned to the dormitory. Maybe they are just ordinary soldiers, insignificant compared to those godlike figures at the forefront. Maybe they just joined the army for fun at the beginning. But after this day, they suddenly felt the heavy burden on their shoulders. We are all human beings, struggling to survive in this end times. No one in this world is born to be a god. What can make people become gods are those ordinary yet great beliefs, persistence and efforts.